Probably one of the most significant domestic violence cases I've had to respond, to the point that he violently aggressed towards her. He wrapped a chain around her neck and hung her from the ceiling. He put her in the trunk of a car and lit the trunk on fire. He took a golf club and hit her in the arm, shattering her arm. There were a series of other very violent things that I'll choose not to speak to. She attempted to escape, was unsuccessful, attempted a second time after he fell into a drunken stupor. She was finally able to grab his flip-flops and a robe and run down the highway, screaming and calling for any car to stop and help her. She was beaten and bruised beyond even recognition.
I'll see Mr. Interstate.
Do you know who made it?
10-4
You're listening to Responder Chronicles with your host, Brian Dita. Today, I am very pleased, very excited to have the Milton, Florida Police Chief, Jen Frank, who has been here. How long have you been chief over here?
Just 6 months, just getting started.
You have been one busy lady.
We have a great crew, and we've been out there in the community. Lots of events, lots of proactive efforts for sure.
Great. Now, you are not originally from here, are you?
Well, that's a tricky question.
Okay.
So originally, I am. I was born in Florida, specifically Hollywood, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Spent my early schooling years here, and then made my way up north. That's where I began my law enforcement career, then made my way back home.
Okay. So I'm a New York City transplant down here. Now, it's been a while. So with that being said, what got you interested in being a law enforcer?
So that's a very long story. I'll try to give you the short version of it. I actually started out as a high school social studies teacher.
Okay.
I was teaching high school social studies, and I had a class, and in that class, I had a student. Brightest student I've ever met in my life. In fact, I was giving him work that I did at college level. But he struggled with some things, and one of those things was he had been diagnosed at that time with Asperger's and had an element of autism that he was working through, and he was struggling some. He walked into my classroom one day and actually displayed a firearm. And with that display of a firearm, he pointed it in the direction of myself and the other students. He was very frustrated, couldn't figure out exactly how to work through some of those emotions. And that's why I bring up that diagnosis is incredible student, incredible kiddo, just had big feelings and didn't know how to express them in a way. And this was the one way he knew he could get some attention. This is just after Columbine. It was long before we had things like, run, hide, fight, long before we had lockdown drills and really knew what to do in those scenarios. I was a school teacher. I'd never held a gun in my life before. And the first time I held a firearm was the moment I was able to convince the student to turn over the firearm, some other weapons involved, and we were able to get him the help that he needed.
Goodness gracious, what a way to break it in. So that was the first time you held a firearm?
First time, based on the way that was handled, reached out, and the chief of the time of the police department said, "Hey, I think you should take a look at switching a career out." And next thing you knew, I traded in my school books for academy books, found myself in the police academy up in New Hampshire, and the rest is history.
My goodness, that's the first one I've ever heard go that way. So, hey, kudos to you. Now, how long was the New Hampshire Police Academy?
So the academy is about 4.5 months. It's different than some other states. New Hampshire and Vermont have a very similar element that there's one police academy for the entire state. It
Okay.
doesn't matter where you come from, you all go to one central location. And it's a Monday through Friday residential. You are there all day and all night. You eat breakfast together, you have dinner together, you have to sleep in the residential dorms. And there's an intensity to that, at that moment of for 40 hours during the day, but then at night you're out there cleaning the bunks. 2 o'clock in the morning, you get woken up to go march in a puddle. It is an experience for sure, but I wouldn't have traded it for anything.
So it's kind of militaristic, almost like a boot camp.
Absolutely, it's a paramilitary academy.
Okay, so because I know different states have different ways, Florida, depending on which school you go to.
Sure.
Okay. From there, you went to a local department or?
So I started it. It's interesting. I began with what's called Plymouth State Police. That's in the very center of New Hampshire. And while I was in there, the Attorney General's office reached out to me and said, "We'd really like for you to join our team." So I had already made a commitment to the Plymouth State Police. I wasn't going to leave them.
Mhm.
And we made an arrangement that I could work for them, but also have a special detail assignment to the Attorney General's office. That was under Kelly Ayotte, who's actually now the New Hampshire governor.
Oh, wow.
And I worked in a unit called SIVS, which is Special Investigation Victim Services.
Okay.
So we handled all the sexual assault, domestic violence, and back then we called it child pornography. Today we call it child sexual abuse imagery. And that was 97% of all of my cases.
Oh, my. So it takes a really special person to have to deal with all of those, everything you see.
There's a level of intensity to those crimes because they are so intense from investigation to the real impact. And every crime that occurs has an impact on a victim. But those crimes in particular have a lifelong impact that we often don't see. If someone was to take an item from somebody in a theft or a burglary or a robbery, we often just think, well, if the person got it back, it's better. And we forget there's that loss of safety that someone feels, right? That emotional connection. That is even more significant when you start looking at crimes against persons, specifically around things like sexual assault or domestic violence.
Okay. Well, thank you for doing all of that. I mean, like I said, not everybody's like, a lot of people don't want to get into that. But you did that. So kind of like you were a detective?
I was an
Okay,
investigator.
investigator. And then from there, you spent how many years there?
I did 10 years of that. And I will tell you, after 10 years, you start to question the good of humanity. And after 10 years of doing just those cases, I knew I needed something different. At the same time, I was working through my education. I had obtained a bachelor's degree, a master's. I was working on what's called a CADS, which is a Certificate of Advanced Graduate Studies. And then from there on to my doctorate. And I was doing a presentation for a school in Windsor, Vermont on internet safety. And the principal asked me, she goes, "What are you going to do when you have your doctorate?" I said, I think I want to be a school resource officer. And everyone goes, "What?" Because for many folks, it's a very different path than I was on. I was working for the Attorney General's office, handling these very high level major crime investigations. And I just wanted to remember the value of the good of people, have that moment to make a very immediate, tangible improvement in society. The benefit of being an SRO is in so many cases, you can resolve that problem that day or the very next day. You can see the impact you're having. Some of these other cases that are of that sexual assault, domestic violence, or again, child sexual abuse imagery, you can never make it better. Even when the person's held accountable, sent to jail, there is this residual element. And I wanted to see the better side of folks. And I will tell you, I hands down still say one of the best jobs I've ever had was being a school resource officer.
Good deal. Good deal. And I remember my school resource officers as I was growing up, and they got to know the students. They got to see what was normal for that person, and you can kind of pick up pretty quickly if there was something going on.
Absolutely. What a great opportunity to see folks be able to be that first interaction, be able to catch things before they happen. Often in law enforcement, we don't find out until that negative incident has occurred. By being out there proactively doing foot patrols, details, being in the school every day, I would be able to know, why didn't mom drop you off today? Because she always drops you off. Or why aren't you talking to Camden at the lunch table because you guys are best friends, and I could stop a fight before it even happened.
Fantastic. I love that. I really do love that. I'm a minister as well, and so one of my jobs is to get to know the people.
Mm,
And as I am up there, ministering and doing that as well, I get to watch them, and I can kind of pick up some clues right away.
for sure.
And so, in Milton, is that I live on the outskirts of Milton, so but I come through town. So how was that? What's the type of policing that's done currently right here?
I think that is actually the definition of how we police here. It's interesting because I refer to Milton as a small city with a hometown feel. There are generations that have been here that have the historical knowledge of this community and really able to share the culture of what it means to be here in Milton. And we have this unique aspect of all the new folks who are moving into our region, combined with Whiting Field bringing in some different recruiters and different military personnel. Because of that, it is all about relational policing. It's about knowing folks before we have to respond in that critical incident. And I'll tell you, my guys are the best at that. Anytime you drive through, you can see officers out playing basketball with folks at the courts. You can see them walking downtown doing a foot patrol. You can see the business checks when they stop into the Circle K or stop into our local flooring place. We recognize that in order to police effectively, it is about those relationships. We cannot only use punishment to change behavior. that is not going to be an effective long-term process. It's about finding the why. How can we address the underlying issue and try to make that better? Now, sometimes that does come with a discipline and punishment element, but really it's about relational, building those connections so we can make this a safer society.
Now, growing up in New York City, when I was a little boy, there was these foot patrols. Of course, New York City is humongous, a totally different world. But and policing there I'm sure, it is so vastly different in so many ways. But I remember the foot patrols. I remember seeing the same officer, and you kind of had a feeling like they're out here watching us.
Mhm.
And of course, I lived in some really rough areas in New York City, and I can tell when something went down and the police presence afterwards, it was like, why can't we have this all the time? So, with that being said, I appreciate what this department has been doing.
Well, thank you.
Chief Frank, since we know what got you into it and what you did, out of those years of service that you've been as an officer, is there an intense story that you will never forget?
There are so many of those incidents, right? So many opportunities that we had to make the world better. And in when people ask us those questions, we tend to go to some of these moments where we've been in those incidents with your firearm drawn, engaging with a suspect, trying to reduce an incident, de-escalate someone who is perhaps wanting to hurt themselves or hurting others. We think of these, significant 7 and 8 motor vehicle crashes in a major storm. But at the end of the day, while they're great stories, or great, fodder for media or for some others, I think the reality of it is that's not what policing is. Policing are the small moments, the little moments that actually almost don't matter. It's the stopping and picking up the litter on the side of the road to demonstrate for your citizens. It's the conversation where you change the tire for the person on the side of the road, or somebody who doesn't have enough money to get their car registered, helping them, not just issuing the citation, but working with them to try to make that better. People want to hear the big story, and we all have them.
Hmm.
But real policing is all of those little tiny moments together. That's
Okay.
what it's about. It's that community building. It's every decision, every word, every interaction, the way you treat your victim as much as the way you treat your suspect and the offender who committed a crime. Sure, I have those moments where you've gone, I'm probably not going to get out of this. And I've had those. I've had those where we were in it was almost a 10,000 person riot after the Red Sox won the World Series. And you look around and you're the only officer
Oh, wow.
surrounded by what at that time felt like hundreds. And later we found out, because of aerial video, thousands, and going, probably not going to come out of this tonight. But those moments aren't what change society. The moments that change society is the kid who you spend 20 minutes or an hour or 2 hours with at the football field, sitting on the bleachers talking to him, that then doesn't commit suicide that night because you had the opportunity to have a very real conversation and they felt heard. Maybe for the first time, or maybe they have been heard, but this is the moment that they actually recognize that there are folks out there that care. Those are the moments, not the big stuff that everybody wants to hear about.
Got it. All right. You've had those, I guess, several moments when you got to know that, let's say, a student, because can I kind of pry where
Sure.
students are a big part of your heart? You were a teacher.
It was.
You went into the kind of law enforcement, rescuing and punishing those who've done horrible things to these children. You went to be a school resource officer, and now you're chief of police, and you have those moments where you're trying to jump in there and, in a way, rescue those who are just on the verge.
100%. And I think that is a great opportunity for us to connect with folks who are open and just seeking a resource, seeking help. We have some great resources here in the city. I will tell you, we've got great community elements. We have different programs and different operational opportunities, but sometimes it just happens to be the person who's walking by Carpenter Park. And that's true for youth as much as it is for adults. We have a lot of seniors in the community who fall victim to scams
Oh,
because they are too afraid to reach out or too embarrassed, and building that relationship so that they know, hey, let me just pick up the phone and call chief. And does this sound right that somebody wants my Medicare number so that they can give me a free back brace? Hold on, Medicare should already know that number.
yeah.
Or somebody who calls and says, chief, this just doesn't feel right. would you pop by the house and chat with me about something? It doesn't just have to be our youth or our seniors. There are a lot of folks in the community who just that having that additional conversation might protect them from becoming a victim down the road.
Fantastic. That being said, is a particular story where you help somebody. It's one of those stories that you think back and go every day. I know there's reasons why you put the uniform on every single day.
Sure.
There are law enforcement officers all over the country who this is the day they're not doing it anymore. They've had enough. What are those? Is there a moment or two, a story or two, without saying their names,
Yeah.
okay, where you can go, this is why I keep doing this?
Absolutely. I have several, so I'll just give you one. But there are several of those moments that really remind you why you do this job. Not too long ago, when I was the chief in Windsor, there was a young lady in our community. I say young lady, she was mid 30s, and she was in a pretty tough relationship. She was in a relationship that was violent, volatile, and yet there were some elements that caused her to keep returning back to that relationship. And I can't tell you the number of times that we chatted about options available to her and resources. But many times people might have resources ready and they're just not ready to utilize them, right? They're not ready to take those. And no judgment on that, but when they're ready, they're ready.
Mhm.
And I had probably had 20, 30, upwards of 40 conversations. We'd responded to incidents involving her and her domestic partner multiple times. This man had assaulted her, battered her, caused some pretty significant harm. And then finally, one day, it got probably one of the most significant domestic violence cases I've had to respond, to the point that he violently aggressed towards her. He wrapped a chain around her neck and hung her from the ceiling. He put her in the trunk of a car and lit the trunk on fire. He took a golf club and hit her in the arm, shattering her arm. It, there were a series of other very violent things that I'll choose not to speak to. She attempted to escape, was unsuccessful, attempted a second time after he fell into a drunken stupor. She was finally able to grab his flip flops and a robe and run down the highway, screaming and calling for any car to stop and help her. She's in the hospital, and they initially went to an interview, and she didn't want to talk. I was able to connect up with her later and was able to get a full interview of what happened. And I will tell you, she was beaten and bruised beyond even recognition. But after days and weeks and months of building that relationship and letting her know, when you're ready, we are here for you.
Mhm.
When you're ready, come talk. I know, Chief, you've been here 25 times. I'll come out 26. I'll come out 27. You tell me when you're ready. I don't care if it's 114. I hope it's not 114, but we'll keep coming. And finally, she goes, I'm ready. And we were able to prosecute that individual, hold him accountable, and send him to jail and eventually to prison for what he'd done. I bring that up because those are the moments where it's easy sometimes to get frustrated with the justice system that has certain laws or statute limitations
Mhm.
as to what they can impose. It's easy to get frustrated when you know something happened, but we have to be able to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. But those are the moments where you go, we'll go out 99 times because maybe that 100th time, that's going to be the time that we can now give her a sense of safety that she herself couldn't find over years and years of abuse. Those are the moments that get you up in the morning.
That is a very good story, and I'm so glad that there are law enforcement officers and agencies that will go there multiple times. Fire and point.
Yep.
We get calls all the time to the same place. Always, it seems like always and over. When we get the call, we still go. That's what we're there for.
Absolutely.
And so that being said, that would get me going. Keep going, putting the uniform on. Is there funny moments, or let's say, dare I say, a strange moment? Because I hate, I like asking this, but then the answer is which one?
For sure.
There's always. Is Do you care to share any?
I have so many funny stories. In fact, I say as law enforcement officers, we should just catalog all these and write a book because people would not imagine the things that we see.
You cannot make this up.
I say that multiple times a day. You cannot make this up. I have some great ones, some funny ones. There was one day where I conducted a traffic stop for a vehicle that was swerving all over the road. We call it failure to maintain lane control. And when I got up to the operator, I noted there was a open container of alcohol in the center console, but there were some other concerning things. In particular, he was wearing a Larry Bird Celtics jersey, no pants, no underwear, no socks, no shoes. And so when I spoke with him, I said, "Sir, I provided my name, rank, why I was there, the reason for the stop." And I said, "I'd like to talk to you about the reason I stopped you today." And he goes, "I know." He goes, "The beer." And I said, "Well," I said, "that was my initial concern was regarding the impairment." I said, "But are you aware you're not wearing any pants?" And he goes, "Oh, I always drive without pants." I go, "And underwear?" And he goes, "Yeah, I never drive with underwear." Now, the challenge is this. He was intoxicated and was operating, so our standard procedure is to then conduct standard field sobriety tests. So I called for a male officer to respond. In fact, the police chief from the neighboring agency came by and stood by while we did a full standard field sobriety test on the side of the road with a gentleman only wearing a jersey. That was certainly quite the moment as you go through. So those are some of the funny ones that you just say, how do you make this stuff up?
And when he gets sober, he goes, "Oh no."
The great news about that is that was back before we had body cams, so
Oh my
there
God.
wasn't anything to be able to capture that moment for to live in perpetuity for him. So hopefully he has looked at that moment, and God gives us the gracious ability to forget sometimes, and hopefully he's been able to forget that
Yes.
minor egregious error right there. So
We had a call, and I can't go into details. We had a call a little while ago, and it started out as a very serious call.
mm.
And actually, I can't go into it because there was nothing to it. A person on fire, and we're like, "Oh my word!" So we're getting rolling, and as we're getting down there, it comes out there's no person on fire. It was just a cornhole game, and we thought, "What kind of cornhole game is this?" So it's those weird things anymore.
Oh, for sure. Like I said, the list could go on with the number of things that we've had to respond to. There's times where you get a call. We responded out to an incident, and somebody very similar to that called in that. Um, and I'm trying to figure out how to do this without revealing who the person was because everybody back home will know exactly who this individual is. But we get a similar call also involved a person unclothed who had made their way out of their home and conducted a uh, bicycle race that they had joined completely unclothed and were just right out the middle, right out front, leading the pack, and caused some concern around some people. So we had to respond out to those moments. Other times, you found people who have gotten themselves stuck in situations, and you go, "How did this happen?" One moment in particular, I really had to chuckle about. We get a phone call because some intoxicated individuals had stolen a grocery cart from a local store, had brought it to the house, had put it on the roof, had then gotten into the grocery cart and ridden it off the roof. They were highly intoxicated. They were concerned that we were going to charge them with the theft of the grocery cart. And I said, "I feel like the punishment you are now experiencing is probably greater than the theft. Let's just get the grocery cart back." Another time we got called to a medical incident on 4th of July where somebody had used a one of those firecrackers and had used their buttocks as the holder for that, and it had splayed open their hind end. So sometimes there are calls that you get to and you just go, "What am I responding to?" But that's the nature. And in fact, that's actually one of the things I love most about this job is you never know what you're going to be responding to. One moment it's a loose dog that's aggressive on a nature trail, followed by an active burglary that's going on, followed by a domestic violence incident, followed by someone complaining because there's a water main break. And so you have these significant highs and lows of having to be immediately ready in a critical crisis incident and then being able to comfort the child who just lost their dog and can't find them.
So what you're telling me is the level of intensity can go up and down, and you got to be able to switch, go from an intense moment to almost nothing at all.
and sometimes at the same call for service. You could have a call for service, which is highly critical. And then the power of a good and effective law enforcement is the ability to, when necessary, ramp up that level of response, but also to be able to have the temperament to be able to pull it back when needed.
Leads me to my next question.
Sure.
What do you do personally to de-stress? Mine is the long drive I have from my job to home, and then I just work on a vehicle. What is yours?
Well, the benefit is I don't have a long drive because I live right here in the community. But I do a lot of things. I tend to be a physically active person. So whether it's out boxing, working out, I love to run, I love to paddleboard, I love being out on the boat, I love spending time with my family. I have two absolutely amazing granddaughters, and I don't care how bad your day's been. Those smiles and those giggles can instantly make it
I
better.
know. I am now a grandpa. I understand that perfectly. I've seen pictures of you. You're a very physically fit lady. And so I think a lot of people get the idea a woman should not be in law enforcement, which I beg to differ. But I'm just going to tell you, you're no person to want to scrap with.
Well, I firmly believe if you're going to do this job, you need all of the skill sets necessary to be effective. And that is both your verbal ability to engage in conversation, also your ability to investigate and put cases together, your ability to respond appropriately and know the laws and regulations that are out there, but also physically to be able to handle yourself. My job is to keep this community safe. And if I get out there and I can't do that, that's a problem. And I do believe that physical fitness is incredibly important in this career field, both physical, actual strength ability, but also your cardio. I had an incident one time where I had a gentleman who had escaped from jail.
Mm.
He had an escape warrant. I was interacting with him under a suspicious person that was being disorderly out in the community. And I'll tell you, he and I got into a really good tussle. Got into a tussle. I tried to put handcuffs on him. He decided he didn't want handcuffs on him. And we threw down. And I will tell you, it took a pretty considerable amount of time to actually be able to detain him to the point that I could get him in handcuffs. We wrestled all the way through a parking lot. We went through an actual wooden fence, a whole 8-foot fence went down in between the two. We wrestled on the other side. I had some backup that was rolling. I could hear him coming as soon as we got in the fight. But it was a pretty lengthy fight. In fact, fortunately, there was video at the gas station, so it was just under 12 minutes, which is a long time to be in a
Yes,
tussle.
yes, it
The
is.
average law enforcement physical force is typically about 2 minutes long in that engagement. I look back at that, he was significantly stronger than I was. He also had about 120 pounds on me. But it was my cardio that kept me in the fight. And because of that, we were able to detain and successfully apprehend a very dangerous individual and get him back into jail because he had escaped at a time when he had been out doing some work in the community and he'd escaped and not come back.
That being said, well, I noticed in Milton, you got backup all around you, as in you got the sheriff's office, you possibly had the state patrol, then you got all the military aspects around here as well. So, on average, in Milton, how far is backup?
Depends on the day. It could
Hmm.
be depends on if it's a weekend, if it's 2 in the morning, or if it's 2 in the afternoon. So that
Hmm.
really varies. What I can say is that there's never a time that we're concerned we're not going to get support from our nearby agencies. We are so blessed. Santa Rosa County Sheriff has come and helped us out on multiple cases. They have a canine unit that we might need if we're doing a drug investigation. And we know that we've got a SWAT unit that we can reach out to that'll help to be there if we have an incident where we need that additional support or equipment. We know that Whiting Field has a police department that can come out and support us. Our neighbors, even from Crestview, Niceville, Gulf Breeze, they've been great about sharing policies, sharing resources. But it even goes beyond that. We work very closely with the correctional staff. We work closely with the hospital security and with the different security agencies, even at our local banks. And I will say there's a group that people forget about that I really appreciate in Milton that really help us with security, and it's the citizens of Milton.
Okay.
I'll tell you, I had an incident up north, and I believe it would happen here too, where I was out, and again, we were tussling with an individual in the middle of the street, and a gentleman who, ironically, I'd arrested earlier that morning for possession of crack cocaine. He came down and he goes, I got your back. And I can't remember if I was chief or detective or whatever it was, but he called out my rank and he's like, I got your back, chief. He came down and he started hanging on to that guy. And the citizens here in Milton care about their safety. They're proactive. They're working with that and they really do support law enforcement. And so that's a group people don't think about. There's only so many of us in law enforcement at a time. And when you talked about, I wish they could be there all the time, we can't be everywhere at any given moment. We don't have the money or the staffing, certainly, to put on that level of enforcement. But that's really where we rely on citizens to see something and say something. Call out when you see something going on in your community, or even go out and have a conversation with the person that you see maybe kicking a sign. Go say, young man, let's chat about this. When you see somebody maybe who's operating a vehicle inappropriately, pulling up alongside them at the local parking lot when they pull into the local gym or their grocery store and say, "Can we chat about your driving?" It's us all helping out together. That's a group of safety citizens that we don't always think about. We just think about other folks who are wearing the patch and wearing the blue.
The guy who helped you, that you just arrested that morning, obviously you showed him respect. Not everybody who commits a crime is a bad person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, I'll tell you, the people who commit the crimes might also tomorrow be our victims and the very next day be our witnesses. And really, it is about that building the relationship. You show me one person in life who hasn't made a poor choice, who hasn't made a mistake. I have asked for grace from some other people before and I've made poor choices, and I hope that I could give it to other people as well.
Sure.
And that's a lot of what that's about is even if you make a bad choice, you're not a bad person. We may need to correct it. There may be some disciplinary elements involved, but at the end of the day, it's still a person who we need to reach out to, recognize that we have all fallen short and we need that grace from one another.
That's right. Chief, what are some words of wisdom for anybody looking into getting into the law enforcement field?
I will tell you, this isn't a career, and I've heard this before, but this is a calling. This is about who you are as a person, from your honor, your integrity, your courage. It's about being brave, but also compassionate. It's about recognizing the individual. It's about having that greater goal of safety. There are some aspects of law enforcement that no one enjoys. No one enjoys having to utilize your authority to make decisions to take away people's freedoms, their rights, their privileges, but it is an element of the job. But just as much as the enforcement element and that authority element is also the recognizing that we have the ability to make people's lives better. We can fix the things that no one else knows how to fix. In fact, no one ever calls the police department to say, hey, I just wanted you to know I'm having a good day. I don't have any problems. I don't have any issues. Because that's not what you get. We get folks who call because they don't know who else to reach out to. As law enforcement, we need to listen more than we speak. We need to have that moment where we stop and we think about that this is a career of service. This is a career of reaching out to folks and saying, I know that you are in a tough spot because either you're a victim, you're a offender, you're a witness, whatever it happens to be. How can I make that better? So if you're looking at this from a career, understand that this is all encompassing. It is all of your life in every moment. But I'll also say to those who are in law enforcement, I want to remind folks that the things that we wear on our uniform represent so much more than just the patch, the badge. I wear a name tag that represents my family, and I want to make sure to honor that. I wear a patch that represents this city, and I need to honor that. Every act that I do here or today or tomorrow is going to impact an officer in California, an officer in Kentucky, an officer in New Hampshire or Vermont. Because when folks look at us, they have a higher expectation. And I'll tell people who are looking to get into law enforcement, that starts today. That starts as a junior in high school, the way you behave, the way that you treat your girlfriends or boyfriends, the way that you engage with your grandparents or the neighbor across the street, the things that you put on social media. Today, start working on your character so that when you get into those moments where you have to be brave, where you can't turn around and run when everybody else is, that you're already prepared, ready for that. Get your physical level up, that when they're called on, that's not when you start doing those push-ups and sit-ups. You need to be ready to respond to the call. Those are the things that I would tell folks. It's not about studying the academy lesson plans or getting ready to know your use of force 10 codes or anything along those lines. It's about making sure that you as a person are the best possible person you could give to serve your city, your county, your state, or whatever version of law enforcement you enter, whether it's federal, military, or any of those others.
When I first met you, it was at the Veterans Memorial Day. It was a Memorial Day gathering over here downtown Milton.
Mm-hmm.
You had your uniform, you had your hat, that I forgot what they
My
call it.
cover.
That I'm like, I saw you and I went, ooh, she looks. You don't want to mess with her. I mean, you just look tough in that. But I walked up to you and you were speaking to a Boy Scout or an ROTC
Mm-hmm.
child, and you said, when you get older, if you want to go into law enforcement, I can already tell you have you have character.
Mm.
Or I believe maybe you said, because what you're doing now shows me you have a good moral character. I can't train you into that. That has to be something already there.
100%. I can teach you skills. I can teach you laws. What I can't teach is character. You either have it or you don't. And right away, I knew that that was an individual who I looked at and said, "You're the kind of person I want to join the Milton Police Department." And I'll tell you, I've seen that embodied. I had a young man who, at the age of 12 and a half, joined my police cadet program. Day he turned 18, I sent him to police academy. Now that's young, setting 18. There's a lot of life experience you haven't had yet, but I knew that that was going to be a man of character. Today, he still is in law enforcement. He's incredibly successful. In fact, I've run multiple cadet programs. And I want to be clear, that success isn't about me. I just been really fortunate to have found some amazing individuals who I knew early on. This is the kind of person that I want protecting our communities. And just like that individual, same thing with that gentleman from ROTC. You can stop and you can look at that gentleman and the ladies that are in there and say, they have a heart for service. They have a heart for helping people. But they also have the ability when push comes to shove and you need to step up and you need to have the courage to make the difficult decision or take the difficult physical action that you can step up and take that.
Absolutely. I have to brag about my son, the
Please do.
co-host here. He's not here. He started off as a firefighter. Now he's a correction officer. And I know one day he's talking about wanting to go on the road. I'm all for that boy. You know, I'm proud of him. And like you said, it takes character.
Absolutely.
Well, Chief Frank, is Milton PD looking for some candidates, or do they need to put an application or be on the lookout?
So we're blessed right now because we are fully staffed. It's the first time actually in about 13 years we've been that way, both our dispatch center and our law enforcement. But here's what I will tell you. For the right person, we'll find a job. And if you're interested in law enforcement, please come through, enter an application. We are always running hiring processes because the reality is we're a growing city. We know that there are more and more folks moving into these communities and into these regions. But also, as the job of law enforcement changes and expands, we know that we're going to need more officers to be able to continue to protect the city in the way that it expects to be protected. And so, if you're interested in joining, come on down, fill out an application. You can go online and get a digital application. We'd love to hear from folks and have you join the ranks.
Great. Chief Frank, thank you again. Hope to maybe have some more of your truth on this podcast.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And for all of you who are listening, Responder Chronicles is here for you to listen and maybe motivate you to take the next step into being a first responder of one type or another. See you on the next one.
You know who made it. 10 12.